Hello, horror fans, and welcome to the Season 3 finale of this Script to Screen podcast, where we delve into the spine-tingling world of horror cinema. Each week, we look at the scariest scenes, unmask the deeper meanings behind your favourite horror films, and explore the psychology of fear that keeps us coming back for more.
From script analysis to scene breakdowns, we'll be dissecting your favorite horror movies to see just what makes them tick. So whether you're a seasoned horror aficionado or just starting to explore the genre, join us as we unravel the spine-tingling stories that haunt the silver screen.
I'm Will.
And I'm Lee.
Now, for those of you that may be new to the show, please check out our website, www.scripttoscreenpodcast.com, because we've added a lot more insight into the scripts and the films that we cover, including scareology graphs illustrating the scares in each of the films we discuss, as well as annotated script excerpts, which highlight some of the ideas and concepts we cover when dissecting the screenplays. So as always, if you want to go deeper on your favorite scripts, there's much more to entertain and delight over at scripttoscreenpodcast.com. Also, if you like what we're doing on the show, please rate and review the episodes. It really helps us reach new people and helps us improve the show as well. Also, leaving a review is amazing for us as it helps us with our algorithmic overlords, Lee. But that said, how have you been, Lee? And what have you been watching?
Yeah, not bad, mate, not bad. I tell you what, though, I've watched a couple of real bangers this week.
Nice.
First of all was the French horror À l'intérieur or Inside, which is a dark as fuck tale about a heavily pregnant woman who falls victim to a home invasion perpetrated by a scissor-wielding psychopath that wants her unborn baby. And this film is quick, scary, and brutal as fuck. I mean, definitely check this out. But I warn you all, this movie goes hard and it goes there. So if you want a slightly tamer version, check out the more recent American remake, which tacks on the essential Hollywood happy ending.
Well, I shall definitely not be watching either of those anytime soon, Lee.
Fair enough. You are missing out, though. I also checked out a great little horror from the Netherlands called Meat Kills. And this one is about a bunch of activists who break into a pig farm in order to free the poor little piggies, but end up taking the farmer's family hostage, and things just continually escalate from there. It's a great little jaunt, and you won't know who to root for as the other hand kind of shifts continuously from one party to the other. But how about you, my man? What's been on your screens this week?
Well, I mean, I've watched a couple of bangers too this week, Lee. So I watched a wonderful film called Tornado, which is a kind of revenge thriller, and it's set in 1790s Scotland. And I know you have a penchant for great concepts, Lee. This is all about a samurai and his daughter who've ended up as kind of traveling string puppet performers in 1790s Scotland. And they kind of fall victim to a group of bandits led by the always great Tim Roth.
Oh,
And I don't want to say too much more other than that I absolutely loved it, dude. It was made by a guy called James McLean, who also wrote and directed a film called Slow West, which is a wonderful Western. You ever seen Slow West, Lee?
I have not, but that Tornado sounds pretty sweet, dude. I might have to check that out.
Oh, it's great, man. I mean, he has this really kind of wonderful style to his films, and he's a really interesting filmmaker. And, he's not afraid to kind of mash genres a little bit. But what I loved about this, apart from obviously samurais in Scotland, is the way he handles kind of exposition and develops narratives, and he'll jump kind of back and forth in time. The narrative at times here is kind of non-linear, but it really kind of makes for compelling viewing. And it also has the film also has an amazing cast, and they're doing really kind of great work. So I'd highly recommend that one, Lee. I also managed to go to the cinema and see Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die with Sam Rockwell in the lead. And this is a Gore Verbinski film. He directs this one. And the script is by Matthew Robinson. And it's so much fun, man. It's bursting with ideas. I just love Sam Rockwell. So, yeah, had a total blast with that one, dude. Highly recommend.
Oh, nice. I may even check that one out too. I do like Sam Rockwell as well, I must confess.
Oh, he's great.
Awesome, dude. So, what is strapped onto the table for dissection this week?
Okay, Lee. Well, this week we are going to be looking at one of the bleakest horror movies ever. It's the British banger that is Eden Lake.
Ah, now we're talking, man. Now we're fucking talking. Boasting an absolutely stellar, largely pre-fame cast. This one goes hard and really cranks up the tension to the max.
Yay. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so Eden Lake was released October 17th, 2008, and would go on to rake in just shy of 4 million at the box office. The film was written and directed by James Watkins.
Nice. We'll be comparing the movie to an undated copy of the script written by James Watkins and weighing in at a super streamlined 85 pages.
Yeah, now James Watkins, I'm sure that's a name that will ring a bell for our audiences.
It should do, man. I mean, over his career, Watkins has been responsible via writing or directing or both sometimes for some stone cold classics, including like the hyper meta My Little Eye, the Speak No Evil remake, The Woman in Black, and the DCEU's upcoming Clayface movie.
Awesome. So safe pair of hands, Lee.
Yeah, safe may not be the word you're looking for, but I get where you're coming from.
Okay, so all right, come on, bud. What made you choose this particular movie for dissection this week?
Well, there are two main reasons for this one. I mean, first up, the film does a fantastic job of using everyday scenarios and situations to horrific effect. In this case, an idyllic location, a bunch of teen chavs, and your personal favorite horror movie trope, a dog, to name but a few. So we'll be looking at how Watkins goes about distorting those familiar things through a lens into pure, unapologetic nightmare fuel. And secondly, this film, as I mentioned already, it's bleak as fuck. You know, it's hard to keep an audience engaged when you're constantly slapping them in the face and poking them with sharp sticks. So we'll see how this film goes about ensuring we all stick around to see the final credits. Before we go there, though, it might be worth you taking a second to illuminate our non-British listeners as to the nature and meaning of the word chav, as we're going to be throwing it around a lot during this episode.
Okay, so I'd never thought I'd be doing this, Lee. I have to say, but a chav is it's a name used to describe delightfully respectful British teenagers who work within their communities to raise living standards. No, it's not, Lee. I'm just japing. The dictionary definition is as follows: a young person of a type characterized by coarse and brash behavior with connotations of low social status. So, so jabs are often associated with antisocial behavior, aggressiveness, drug use, spitting on street corners, carrying knives, and certain types of branded sportswear. They can often be found in groups or packs. And it is also seen as somewhat a kind of classist term that stereotypes and possibly sort of becomes a form of social racism, I think, as chavs tend to be on the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder. What is important to remember is all their horrendous behavior should be seen through the lens of their personal trauma, Lee, and a social context. And as such, it's completely excused, acquiesced to, and forgiven.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Man, I fucking hate chavs. They are definitely on my list.
Dude, I shudder to ask who or what else is on your list, Lee.
I mean, to be honest with you, it's probably more like a thick encyclopedia that list at this point, so we won't get into it right now.
We haven't got time for your list.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's with a little bit of trepidation that I say, let's strap down and slice open Eden Lake. A middle-class couple's romantic weekend at a remote lake turns violent when they clash with a gang of local teenagers. As harassment escalates into torture and survival horror, their faith in social order collapses, subjecting them to a ruthless ordeal where only the strongest and most sadistic will survive. So, over the opening titles, we get some disturbing music and a few fast, almost subliminal cuts. A woman in distress, a child, a lake. It's frenetic and hard to make out, but instantly unnerving.
Yeah, in the script, we actually get a full-on cold open, kind of a little glimpse into the future, if you will. Check it out.
Black screen, exterior, woods, night. Dark woods, thick, tall tree trunks block out the sky. A young woman, Jenny, cradles the bloody, lifeless body of a 12-year-old boy. Her clothes torn, dirty, covered in her blood and his. Her face a patchwork of pain, blood, scratches, sorrow, savagery. In the woods, shouts, torchlights advancing, converging. Jenny can't stay here. She tears off through the woods, running for her life. Title card, 3 days earlier. So Lee, cold opens seem to be very popular in horror films. Why do you think they kind of changed this one or cut it down?
I don't know, man. I mean, I think you could definitely have planted this cold open at the beginning of the film and it would have worked just fine. The downside to it is that it would reveal perhaps a little too much of the plot too soon. I mean, if we'd started with this scene as soon as we saw the kids, we'd have a pretty good inkling that things would go south fast. I think what Watson does here is actually quite clever by using Texas Chainsaw like inserts. We know something bad is coming. It disturbs us, lets us know we're in for a really bad trip, but we have no idea at the moment what the cause is. It could be aliens or a bad case of food poisoning for all we know. By cutting down on the information, I think he keeps attention but loses the cause.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in viewing this, kind of, we all know this is a horror movie and we're probably in for some form of a rough ride. So I'm not sort of 100% sure, like highlighting that in this way is necessary, but, it definitely does kind of set the tone for the film and, raises the tension levels early, doesn't it? I think having these more kind of subjective, dare I say, artistic kind of flash cuts rather than a more plot revealing scene is probably a good way to go, especially because this way is really much more kind of protagonist focused.
Hmm.
And I think that's probably a good move. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting that they've done it. Anyway, on screen, we are introduced to the quite lovely Jenny, played by a pre Yellowstone Kelly Riley, as she tutors a bunch of preschool children. And how sweet is she, dude? I mean, she has a lovely relationship with her class. It's all very sweet, very warm. Now, with school out for the week, she hurries to meet her boyfriend, Steve, and he is played by the always excellent Michael Fassbender.
Yeah, Steve is checking out a boxed engagement ring, which, as every horror fan knows, means that he may as well be 2 days from retirement with his first kid on the way. In other words, this poor guy is as good as dead.
Okay, well, let's not ring the death bell for poor Steve just yet. It's early days, Lee.
Mm. Also, in the script, we get a little extra with one of the kids really not wanting to leave Jenny, and Steve listening to a news report about a kid feeding his cat to a dog. Lovely.
Mm. Back on screen, and a handy little exposition drop lets us know that Steve and Jenny are heading to an abandoned, flooded quarry for the weekend. Something of a beauty spot, it would seem.
Yeah. In the script, we get a couple of pages of largely irrelevant banter between the two.
And back on screen, as the day turns to night, we get a little radio interview about teenage delinquents and their irresponsible parents.
Yeah, a little bit of theme stated there, methinks.
Yes, Lee. Yeah, I agree. Good point. Now, after almost running over a bunch of speeding BMX kids, Steve finally arrives at the local B&B where they'll be staying. They are definitely fish out of water here, Lee. And while outside in the beer garden, they lament that the kids running rampant are up way past their bedtime. Steve comments that they could use a hiding when a local mother does just that and slaps the shit out of her kid. She then stares Jenny down until the kind hearted kindergarten teacher looks away.
Yeah, nice place to visit. Well done, Steve.
Yeah, could have been Paris, but no. Okay, but according to Steve, it was all right the last time he came here with his diving buddies. So our two misplaced travelers snuggle in together to the sound of yobs clashing outside, which is always nice.
Oh, yeah.
The next morning, our optimistic duo drive out to the site of Eden Lake, formerly Slapton Quarry. The construction sign promises a gated community, but as they drive past, we see the rear of the sign boast the graffitied words, "Fuck off, yuppie cunts."
It's a really great understated visual here. Like you got the pristine new upcoming community on one side, and yet underneath is that undercurrent of xenophobia, hatred, and hostility. It's a really nice little bit of subtext in there.
Yeah, brilliant. So Steve drives them through some truly beautiful forest scenery before he arrives at an imposing metal fence. But after following it for a few hundred meters, he's able to find a gap and they head on towards the lake. Now it's here the sat nav somewhat prophetically states the first opportunity, turn round. So it's a really nice touch that I thought.
Yeah, there's a little extra banter between them in the script, but again, nothing of any importance is lost.
And finally, our dynamic duo arrive at the titular Eden Lake. And I'll give Steve some credit here, Lee. It's pretty damn gorgeous, isn't it? It's a pretty lovely spot.
Mm.
So they encounter a young lad, Adam, who is collecting bugs in jars and meticulously cataloguing them. Jenny heads over to say hi, but Adam remarks that he's not allowed to talk to strangers. So they kind of leave him be, don't they?
Mm. It's a great little character beat for Jenny, I think. I mean, most of her life revolves around children. You can tell she just has innate maternal instinct, and her first kind of instinct is to try and engage the lad. Make sure he's okay and show an interest in what he's doing. It's all like kindergarten teacher 101.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, they finally make it to the lakeside where they bed down, strip off to their swimwear, and enjoy a spot of sunbathing. So the idyllic scenery doesn't last long, though, as poor Adam is chased away by a pair of gobby teenage chavs. Jenny is clearly distressed, but Steve just kind of shrugs it off as boys being boys. And as long as they leave them alone, he's not particularly bothered. Now, a short while later, Jenny is woken from her nap by a barking Rottweiler. And it's our first jump scare of the film, and it comes in at around the 12-minute mark. Now, by this point, the Chavs have increased in number, and their leader, Brett, played by the phenomenal Jack O'Connell, is clearly the alpha.
Mate, I love Jack O'Connell, but I kind of feel like the guy was born to play assholes. I mean, he does it just so bloody well.
He does play a superb asshole. There's no doubt about it. Okay, so Steve heads out for a swim, but when the dog continually harasses Jenny, he heads up to the gang and asks them to turn down both their music and their behavior. It goes about as well as you'd expect, and Steve heads back to Jenny, determined not to be bullied off the beach by a bunch of kids, god damn it. After a while, the kids head off, purposefully walking straight through Steve and Jenny. Teenage Brett takes a moment to flash the duo before they disappear into the woods. Steve and Jenny, they breathe a sigh of relief, and as the sun begins to set, they set up camp. Now, Jenny feels eyes on her from the tree line, but she can't see anyone there.
Yeah, they're going full Friday the 13th with these POV shots. I love it.
Yeah. Night has fallen, the tent is up, and the campfire's burning as Steve and Jenny finally get some romantic time together, Lee. Jenny is still getting that feeling, though, and her and Steve retire to their pop up tent to get freaky. But the freak just ain't happening, as Jenny is adamant that she can hear something outside. So eventually, Steve heads out to investigate. All seems okay, but then Steve goes quietly, and Jenny becomes increasingly more alert. Has something happened out there? Boom! Steve pops his head into the tent and drops a fake out jump scare at the 22-minute mark. After that, it's all lovey-dovey as the two campers settle down for the night. The next morning, they wake to find bugs have raided their food hamper, so it's back into town they go, only it looks like somebody stashed a bottle under their tyre, and now they have a flat tyre, god damn it. Steve is becoming increasingly annoyed while he changes the tyre, but all is eventually sorted and they head back into town, only to be cut up by the chavs on their bikes, and Brett mocks him about his tyre, and Steve is off in pursuit but quickly loses the local hoods.
Yeah, in the script, it's not specified that these are the same kids. Steve is just royally pissed off at this point.
In a local cafe, Steve asks a waitress about the kids. She laughs it off until he mentions letting their parents know about the trouble they caused. Then she immediately gets defensive. Interior, cafe, day. Jenny and Steve sit at a booth. Steve is still stewing. A waitress comes to take their order. Waitress, what would you like? Jenny, I'll have the full English. Toast, white coffee. Waitress, and for you? Steve, same. A beat. You haven't seen a bunch of kids tooling around on BMXs? Jenny looks away, incredulous. Waitress, I certainly have. In brackets, laughs. They've been terrorizing you. Steve, hassling us. Waitress, little terrors. Shouldn't worry, big boy like you. Steve, they bust my back tire with a bottle. I just thought the parents might like to know. Waitress, not my kids. The friendly tone hardens. Local diners look over. Steve, no, I didn't mean it was your kids. Waitress, not mine. Steve, I don't want to make a big deal of it. Never mind. The waitress huffily goes off to get their breakfasts. Jenny, making friends?
Yeah, someone's going to get some spittle in their eggs, I think. So, well, I mean, while this scene may seem innocuous enough, I think it's actually a setup or a forewarning of events that will transpire later in the film. I mean, this community, these kids and their parents are so closed off and willfully ignorant. And you'll see this a lot with petty criminals or delinquents and their parents. They just instantly default to denial. You know, it's like avoidance tactics 101. And clearly it's ingrained in this little community to the very core.
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of interpreted this like slightly different, or maybe we're on the same page, but the waitress is fine to admit the kids are terrors in a kind of playful way, as like kids will be kids, but they're harmless kind of style. But her attitude really changes, when Steve says the parents might want to know that the trouble that they're causing. And it's then that she sort of gets defensive and says that they're not her kids. So for me, this is either signaling the parents are not to be trifled with, or she is specifically kind of denying responsibility for these kids. And it's the parents who should be taking responsibility. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, fair enough. But you know what we haven't done in for ages?
What's that?
Random page check.
Oh, nicely. Let's do it. So, screenwriting law dictates that a page equals roughly 1 minute of screen time. So, we are at the 23rd minute of the film, which should put us on around page 23 of the script. So, come on, dude. How close are we?
We're actually pretty bang on, two-thirds of the way down page 22.
Damn.
I mean, technically, there's been a lot of small dialogues cut from the script, but it still worked out pretty well here, I'd say.
Yeah, it's pretty good, isn't it?
Hmm.
Anyway, back to the movie, and a stewing Steve spots the kids' BMXs outside a house. So he stops the car and heads in to have words with the parents. Now, there's no answer at the door, so the dumb motherfucker just heads inside, Lee. I mean, why
Yeah.
not?
I mean, you want to get stabbed, Steve, because that is how people get stabbed.
Agreed. Like just walking into a stranger's house uninvited. I mean, this is not advisable behavior, people. Okay, so to make matters worse, Brett's dad has just pulled up outside and heads into the house, forcing Steve to creep upstairs. But this is edge of your seat stuff, and it all kicks off at around the 25-minute mark.
Yeah, I mean, now this scene actually does a hell of a lot of legwork. You know, it drops so much character and backstory, mostly through unspoken visuals. So let's take a second to break it down. I mean, first off, you've got the general aesthetic of the place. You know, it's yellowed. It's not a hovel, but it's dated, at least downstairs. You know, it looks like something that hasn't changed in decades. It reeks of complacency. We've got the school photo, that classic portrait style shot of Brett looking miserable as fuck, something every survivor of the British education system will be more than familiar with.
Oh, I enjoyed school, Lee.
Yeah, I most certainly did not enjoy school. Um, as we move further into the house, you know, we see a door with a hole punched through it. You know, kid height, most likely Brett, unable to control his anger. Then we've got Brett's dad, you know, white van, working class, clinking shopping bags, obviously full of beer, instantly angry the moment we meet him. And upon seeing the hole in the door, full on raging to get his hands on his son. You know, I mean, this is our antagonist role model. This is who he looks up to. And then we go into Brett's room, his bedroom. And what have we got? We got samurai posters, tits. He's downloading porn on his PC. And when Steve looks out the window, what does he see? Brett and his gang torturing the neighbor's rabbit. I mean, this little snippet of dysfunctional home life, I think, gives us so much information, and it's literally all done through the use of mise en scene. And there's a little extra moment in the script that never made it to the screen that almost turns the moment kind of tragic instead of horrific. Have a listen.
Interior, downstairs, day. The driver down his shopping bags, in brackets of booze, takes in the mess, sees the hole in the wall, traces his hands towards it. His knuckles fit. His eyes linger on an old family photo. Him, his wife, his son, Brett, all smiling. Tears well. He slaps them away, lashes out at coffee cups. Smash. Yeah, I mean, if you ask me, that's kind of exactly why they took this part out. We're being set up to despise these people. And while the layered antagonist is always good, I think encouraging empathy and imparting depth, may have just kind of muddied the waters and lessened the film's impact somewhat.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that one.
Okay, so with Steve safely back in the car, they head back to the lake where they enjoy some peaceful time and an impromptu swim. Meanwhile, we get more sinister POV shots from the tree line, and somebody is definitely watching them, Lee. Steve goes scuba diving in the lake, and upon his return, he's about to reveal the engagement ring when Jenny notices the beach bag containing their car keys is missing.
Every time that engagement ring comes out, I can literally hear the doom bells tolling in the background.
Okay, so with the bag nowhere to be found, they head back to the car only to find it missing. And to say Steve is annoyed would be an understatement here, Lee.
He is pissed.
Yeah, quite understandably, I think. So, with the car gone, the two have no choice but to begin the long trek back to civilization. And it's not long before they find the car, or rather, it finds them as they're almost run down by the speeding vehicle. The yobs inside jeer and curse them as Brett grins wickedly from the driver's seat, wearing Steve's sunglasses. Oh, what a dick. There's no time for Steve or Jenny to react as the car tears off into the wilderness, and our bruised couple continue their trek as the sun begins to wane.
Yeah, there's another great little visual dropped into the foreground, unseen by our protagonists. A destroyed bird's nest sort of lies among discarded bottles and rubbish. The eggs have been broken. It's another subtle bit of foreshadowing that tells us that these kids are far more disturbed than we fear. But check out how it's written in the script. It's written really well.
Exterior, wood, dusk. A raided bird's nest. Bloody smears of its smashed eggs mess the bark below it. Broken eggshells lie at the base of the tree, alongside Alco Pops and Tipex bottles. They trudge on. So this is the second time we've seen that these kids get a kick out of torturing and harming animals. First the rabbit, now this. I mean, it's often suggested that harming animals in one's youth could correlate to later psychopathic tendencies. If these little shits are anything to go by, I'd say they're a right bunch of nutters.
Yeah. Is that your medical opinion, Dr. Will?
It is.
That's more than fair. I'd say Brett especially exhibits a lot of psychopathic behavioral traits, but we'll talk about this more in depth during the breakdown.
It's night now, and Steve and Jenny spot a fire burning in the woods. And upon investigating, they find Brett and his crew torturing a badger they've somehow managed to trap beneath an upturned shopping trolley. And things are kind of reaching boiling point. This is a super tense scene that kicks off at the 30-minute mark. Steve demands they return his keys, wallet, and phone, but Brett denies all knowledge, his Rottweiler Bonnie getting more and more aggressive as Steve's anger rises.
I mean, the tension in this scene is off the charts. Steve knows he's in a bad spot here, but he's also been pushed about as far as he can go. There's a line in the script that perfectly sums up Steve's predicament. Check it out. A scuffle. Individually, Steve could clobber any of them, but they come as a pack, close ranks. And that's the point. I think individually, one on one, Steve could take them easily. But, these aren't prepubescent kids. They're adolescent teens, hormonally charged, no strangers to violence. And they outnumber him 5-1, hell, 7-1 if you include Brett's girlfriend, Paige, and Bonnie the Rottweiler.
Don't forget Steve's got Jenny for backup, though, Lee.
I don't think the angelic Jenny has reached the point of no return yet, but I dare say her limits will be severely tested before the night is through. If it were Beth Dutton facing down these kids, they'd have no chance.
Okay. So Brett again denies all knowledge of stealing the car and their other possessions.
Yeah, it's literally the same thing as the woman from the diner. Not us, mate. Not my kids. And it's so fucking infuriating.
Steve is getting more and more riled at this point, and he can see that Brett is wearing his sunglasses, which he denies. And then hears the phone go off, and that's it. He's had enough, Lee. And he wades in to get his phone. A scuffle ensues, and one of the little bastards pulls a switchblade. But Steve is able to grab it, and in the ruckus, Bonnie the dog slips her leash and lunges at Steve, but manages to impale herself on the knife.
This moment is so well written. I feel that we have to include it.
Steve claws for the phone, lands a couple of punches. A flash of steel. Ricky produces a knife. Steve grabs at it. The dog jumps in, snapping at Steve's head. Steve fends it off. The dog drops. The knife bloody in Steve's hand. Shock silences the camp. Where everything happened fast, it now happens slow. Harry clutches his head where Steve hit him. The dog whines, whimpers, twitching, bleeding, dying. The gang leader Brett suddenly reduced, his voice reedy. Brett, Bonnie? Bonnie, you stuck my dog. Brett hugs his dying dog, close to crying. Steve, mate, I didn't mean... Get the car, I'll drive you to a vet. Brett, get away, fuck off. Brett pulls the car keys from his pocket and throws them past Jenny into the dark of the woods. Kids glare, sharp sticks in hands. Jenny, Steve, come on. Yeah, I mean, the action lines are so quick and abrupt, and, you can feel everything just rushing past until that critical moment, that tipping point summed up so perfectly on the page, where everything happened fast, now it happens slow. And it's really interesting in this moment because all the testosterone has kind of momentarily drained away and the characters are resorting back to their default selves. So Steve is immediately horrified and apologetic. He even offers to drive them to the vet. Brett even almost appears kind of childlike for a moment. He's genuinely upset about his dog, but almost immediately he reacts with anger, throwing the keys and cursing. Jenny, I think, knows, the worst is coming here. I mean, she's straight away gathered up the keys and is pulling Steve away. And for the rest of the kids, they're on a tipping point. If Brett picks the dog up and goes home, they'll go with him. If he escalates things, well, they're going to be all in. Also, I'm quietly cursing Steve for dropping the damn knife here. I mean, I understand his reaction, but still, come on, dude. And yet another canine fatality, Lee. I'm starting to think this isn't just you being a douchebag. It's horror being a douchebag.
Next month's movie is Old Yeller.
Oh, it is you.
I mean, it feels a little late in the day, but I had the end of Act One here. I mean, this confrontation is definitely the point of no return, right? I mean, I briefly pondered the theft of the beach bag a few minutes earlier, but, if they'd kept walking, then they would have all survived.
Yeah, I mean, it feels late to me too, man, but I'm not sure where else it could really be. So yeah, I kind of placed it here too, actually. Yeah. Does feel a bit late though. So Steve and Jenny finally have a small stroke of luck as they run slap bang into their abandoned car. But as they pile in and drive off, an enraged Brett leads his crew in a furious charge, Lee. The car gets stuck at the base of a hill and the kids smash the windshield with rocks and shatter the front headlights. Now, Steve is able to reverse the car and accelerate into the woods, but he's practically driving blind. And no prizes for guessing what comes next. Steve crashes the car into a fallen tree and finds himself trapped in the driver's seat, with the feral kids closing in. He sends Jenny to get help, and she reluctantly flees into the woods as the car is surrounded.
Yeah, there's a small but interesting difference in the script here. On the page, Steve crashes because he intentionally avoids running some of the little bastards over. Check it out.
He flips on the flashing emergency lights. More kids on bikes emerge from the trees. Jenny. Steve! Steve instinctively swerves to avoid them. Into the trees, losing control, slaloming past a couple of trees, heading for a third tree. Smash! A slamming collision. Yeah, this doesn't happen in the film, but I like the fact that Steve is still unwilling to intentionally harm the kids at this point, you know? Yeah, it's a good contrast for us as an audience, I think.
Yeah, I gotta say, if this was me, I think a few of those kids would be wrapped around my tires by now.
Yes, Lee. That's what I like to hear. Okay, so after a cut to black, we find that it's now morning and the sun is up.
Ah, thank God. That would have given Jenny plenty of time to get to the road, summon help, right?
No, no. It looks like she spent the night hiding under a tree.
Worst girlfriend ever.
Well, to be fair to the girl, it's insinuated in the script that the kids spent a lot of time searching for her, thus forcing her to hide. So I think, well, what can she do? With the coast seemingly clear, she heads back to the car, only to find to her relief and horror that Steve is gone. An ominous blood trail leads her deeper into the woods. It isn't long before she finds what she's looking for. Steve, bound with barbed wire and Bonnie's chain leash, is surrounded by Brett and his cronies. He's on the phone telling his crew to watch the roads. And this is hard to watch, this scene. It kicks off at around the 39-minute mark. And maybe Jenny had the right idea after all.
Yeah, maybe.
So Steve tries to reason with Brett, but he's having none of it. Some of his crew are wavering, though. A kid named Harry is close to bailing, insisting that he never touch Steve. Brett quickly nips this in the bud, pulling a knife and telling his cowering crony that he either uses it on Steve or on him. Unwilling to challenge the alpha male, Harry cuts a deep gouge into Steve's arm before throwing up in disgust.
Yeah, I mean, despite being a absolutely deplorable little shit, Brett is clearly the alpha here for a reason. He's not just seemingly the toughest, but more importantly, he's clearly the smartest too. He insists that Paige film what they are doing and then forces the other lads to mutilate Steve as well. That way they are all in it together, so to speak.
Yeah, nasty stuff. This whole scene is a really tough watch, man. I mean, it makes it worse that it's shot with such kind of visceral realism. There's no kind of
Mm.
extravagant effects or flashy shots. It just feels like we're watching a poor bloke being, fucking tortured, and it is rough. Two more of the gang take their turns: the scarily cold Mark and the jittery Ricky.
Yeah, man. I mean, Mark is second only to Brett in the fucking scary stakes. A fellow psychopath, I'd wager. Only this one is the strong and silent type.
Yeah, it's always the quiet ones, Lee. Finally, it falls to the youngest of the group, Cooper. He's trying to sneak away, but to no avail. He's dragged back in by Brett and reluctantly lashes out at Steve, inadvertently jamming the knife into his mouth and cutting him up good.
Yeah, is it me or does Cooper look like someone superimposed a 40-year-old's face onto a 12-year-old's body?
Yeah. Thomas Turgoose, man. I mean, this kid, he's such a great actor, He's obviously known for his work with Shane Meadows. I mean, he's great in this and has this face that you just kind of instinctively empathize with.
Hmm.
Yeah, but he does look strangely old, though.
That kid has seen some shit, man.
Okay, meanwhile, still watching from the trees, Jenny has a flash of inspiration and she uses the sat nav to link via Bluetooth to Steve's phone and dial 999. Brett has the phone in his pocket and immediately ends the call before deducing that Jenny must be close. Jenny then makes herself visible and flees into the woods as Steve screams at her to run.
Yeah, I mean, I was originally going to slate Jenny for being so blatantly obvious here, but then I realized that she's probably intentionally trying to draw the kids away from Steve. And, to her credit, it does work.
Yeah, indeed it does. I mean, the whole gang hop on their bikes and try to run her down, which gives Steve enough time to make a painful getaway. Jenny leads the kids on a merry chase, but she's not going to outrun those bikes. She grabs a fallen branch and skewers Brett's front wheel, causing a massive pileup, which gives her a brief moment of respite. It takes the kids a few moments to gather their wits before they continue the pursuit on foot. Using this brief advantage, Jenny tears into a field that doubles as a construction site. A porter cabin sits secured in the middle, and she guns for it. The shack is chained and secured, but there's a walkie-talkie inside. She struggles to reach it, but to no avail. There's no more time to waste, though, as Brett and the gang are closing in at the 46-minute point.
Yeah. Now, in the script, things play out a little differently, so have a listen.
Brett, in brackets, whispers, "Turn your phones off." The kids enter the construction area, fan out, looking. He programs his phone to search for a nearby Bluetooth device. Beep. Steve's sat-nav appears on his screen. Brett looks on. His signal strength bars rise and fade depending on his proximity, showing him where is hot and cold, which way to go. Exterior, construction clearing, continuous. Jenny's sat-nav beeps in her pocket. With one arm stuck, she struggles to get it out and silence it. She sees the Bluetooth connection, knows the kids are near. Looking through the porter cabin and out the window on the other side, she sees the kids closing in. Having strained to get her arm and shoulder so far inside the cabin, she now struggles to get it free. Her top snags on a splintered section of the door. Exterior construction site clearing, continuous. Brett consults his phone. The signal strength rises. 4 bars become 5, focusing him in on the porter cabin. Silently, Brett signals to all the others. They close in on the porter cabin, encircling it, knives drawn. Brett nods. Mark and Brett sit back to back, like practiced housebreakers, Mark's body supporting Brett as he rabbit kicks the front door. The walkie-talkie is still there. And the sat-nav. A decoy. Brett picks it up, unwittingly setting off. "Sat-nav, Kylie, you have reached your destination." So there's no use of the sat-nav on screen. And you know what's coming, dude. Why the change, do you think?
I don't know, man. I mean, I really like the script version here. I think, again, it shows Brett's cunning and intelligence, and it adds something of a ticking clock to the page, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder whether it possibly casts Brett in a more cunning, methodical light than was wanted.
Hmm.
I mean, on screen, he does come off as kind of a bit more feral and like he's making this shit up as he kind of goes along, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's probably about how Watkins wants us to perceive Brett, but it could be this might appear a bit clunky on screen or maybe slow things down too much. But yeah, interesting. Okay, so back in the film, though, Jenny outsmarts the youths by flattening out on the roof of the porter cabin out of sight, while the gang pillage the cabin beneath her. Meanwhile, Ricky, who was sent back to guard Steve, finds that his quarry has escaped, and a quick call to Brett summons back the troop and gives Jenny some breathing space. Steve makes it back to the car and retrieves a first aid kit, some water, a tire iron, but unfortunately sets the damn car alarm off Lee in the process, alerting everyone within a 2-mile radius to his current location. He stumbles away into the woods and takes cover behind a tree, readying the tire iron to take out his pursuer, and he attacks, but it's Jenny Lee. Thankfully, she barely avoids the blow, and reunited at last, the two of them head off into the woods together. They take cover in an old bird-watching shelter by the lakeside, and Jenny attempts to tend to Steve's wounds. It's a hopeless task, though, and they both know it, but Jenny is in full comfort mode now and assures him that everything will be okay. And she even finds the engagement ring, Lee.
Oh man, he is fucked now. You know, the Ring of Doom. That thing is so cursed. I'm half expecting a hobbit to turn up and throw it into a volcano.
Yeah, it's starting to seem that way, as at that moment, the kids rock up outside on their bikes at around the 52-minute mark. They burst into the hide, but besides some bloodied medical supplies, our battered heroes are nowhere to be found, and Jenny has managed to pry up a floorboard, and her and Steve are hiding in the lake beneath the hide.
Another great little character beat for Brett here as he spots Jenny's bloody footprint and ascertains that the two of them must be reunited together.
The kids split off again, and Jenny drags Steve out of the lake, but he's not doing good. He can't move anymore, so Jenny hides him beneath some leaves and decides to go for help.
It always amuses me how his head is just poking out of the top of the leaves, like blatantly obvious. But in the script, there's an interesting little prelude to this scene that didn't make it to the film.
She tries to rub him warm. Blood leaks through his bandages. Steve, I'm scared, Jenny. I'm really scared. Jenny, in brackets, rubbing him. I know. He coughs up more blood, a hallucinatory edge to his eyes. Steve, those little fuckers. You get their names? Jenny nods. Brett, Harry, Ricky. Jenny, in brackets, nods. Shh, don't tire yourself. Steve, Mark, Cooper, in brackets, Jenny nods. Tell me their names. Tell me. She hesitates. She sees that she's losing him. Jenny, Brett, Paige, Mark, Steve, Cooper. Jenny, Cooper. He slumps, slips out of consciousness. Jenny continued. Steve? Steve? She thinks she's lost him. She rubs and slaps him. Nothing. Fear overwhelms her for a moment. Then she runs and retrieves the oxygen canister from the hide, gives him a big hit. So this is interesting, isn't it, Lee? I mean, it stands to reason that Steve, who has a much more rigid moral center than the kids, is still adamant for justice, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's this moral core, I think, that gets him into trouble in the first place. You know, that belief and rightly held that criminal acts should get punished and those who abide by the law should be protected by it. You know, it sucks because while he could have walked away and prevented things from escalating, you know, it was his moral belief that spurred him on and ultimately pushed the kids over the tipping point.
Yeah. Do you think we can blame him for that?
I mean, obviously, in hindsight, it was absolutely the wrong choice from a survival perspective. But morally, you know, he had the high ground the whole time for all the good it did him, and that's a big part, I think, of what makes the film so damn horrific.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's weird. Like, I had a sense it was Steve's kind of pride, and, he felt like his masculinity was being challenged and tested here. Um, and not really so much his sense of morality. Did you have any kind of thoughts on that? It might just be how Fassbender kind of plays it.
Hmm. I mean, there is definitely a sense of, wanting to look like a man in front of his girlfriend, but, I still think it's down to that moral center. I think that's why he gets himself in so deep.
Yeah, yeah, cool. I mean, another thing I noticed that has been sort of cut from the film, and it's kind of present in this scene, is there's a lot of substance abuse on the page. Brett is constantly sort of huffing some nasty shit, and Steve is taking drags from an oxygen canister to keep him on his feet.
Yeah, I mean the BBFC has some pretty strong guidelines about substance abuse, especially common substances. It boils down to them not allowing the following on screen. The misuse of easily accessible and highly dangerous substances, such as aerosols or solvents, i.e., huffing, is unlikely to be acceptable without strong contextual justification. I think the key here being that the script shows Brett regularly inhaling, easy to acquire substances, which could be copied by dumbass kids and lead to potential fatalities. So I'd wager it was a cut that was imposed by the BBFC. And to be honest, rightly so in this case, I'd say.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Bit of a shame though, Lee, because I think we could do with a cull, you know?
Mm. Yeah, natural selection.
Yeah, obviously I'm joking. Having said that, in the very next scene, Brett is sniffing something, which he forces on Cooper to sniff to keep him awake.
Yeah, I think that point still stands though. I mean, I have no idea what he's sniffing there. It's not like a spray in a bag or anything like he does in other scripted scenes.
Yeah. So Jenny has reached the power lines and is now hopefully able to follow them to safety. As she sprints, reinvigorated, we see a sharp metal shard sticking out of the ground.
One spike in an entire field, I'm sure it won't be an issue.
Chekhov's gun, my friend. Poor Jenny puts her foot straight down on the spike a little after the 57-minute point.
Oh my God, man, it's like fucking Quiet Place all over again.
You mean Home Alone, surely? The kids pick up on Jenny's cries of pain and make a beeline for her location. An agonized Jenny manages to crawl into the bushes and throw herself down an embankment to put some distance between her and her pursuers. But now she's got to get that damn metal out of her foot, and it's not going to be pulled out the way it went in. So Jenny bites down on some wood.
Giggity.
She bites down on a stick and braces her foot against a tree and pushes the damn spike through her foot and out the other side. Oh,
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, this whole scene is very Quiet Place, isn't it? Impaled foot. Woman has to perform painful medical procedure without screaming.
yeah. Possible inspiration, probable coincidence.
Yeah, agreed.
Through gritted teeth and guts, she manages to crawl back up the embankment only to find herself face to face with a kid. But it's just Adam, the timid bug collector from earlier in the film. Despite her ragged and desperate appearance, she's able to convince him to take her to town. They set off, and Adam leads her to a clearing where he insists his mum will soon arrive to pick him up. Now, Jenny rightfully smells a rat and snatches the boy's phone, but it's too late. Brett and the gang have arrived, and Jenny is knocked out by a sneak attack.
Yeah, the interaction with Adam plays out a little differently in the script. First, he insists they play a round of conkers, and afterward, he is a lot more talkative, asking about what happened and why the gang are chasing her. And he then sends a blatantly shifty text, which we quickly learn is to alert the gang to his location. And upon their arrival, he asks to join them.
Oh, what a little shit sack.
Shit sack indeed, but yeah, again, it's survival instinct, I mean, in the script, he points out how Jenny and Steve stood by him, did nothing when he was bullied earlier at the lake. As far as he's concerned, these hoods probably make his life hell, and here, no matter how misguided, he spots a chance to improve his standing with them.
Yeah, strange he has their mobile numbers, though, you know?
Hmm.
Interesting. Anyway, poor Jenny wakes up as gasoline is splashed over her face. She's tied to a makeshift pyre with Steve, who is now dead, unfortunately. Some of the kids are squeamish about burning Jenny alive, and so it falls to Adam. As Brett says, he's seen too much. He either lights the fire or he's next. And this all happens at the 1 hour, 2 minute mark.
Yeah, I mean, something that just occurred to me about Brett is he's kind of like a little Charlie Manson, isn't he? Technically, he's not really laid a finger on Steve or Jenny yet. He's got his little gang to do all the damage. So if they were to get busted, he'd probably face the least consequences out of all of them.
Yeah, like most apparent alphas, Lee, he's a coward at heart. Just makes it even more frustrating. Anyway, Adam tosses a match on Steve and the gasoline goes up. Steve is cooking nicely, but the ropes are also burning. The whole gang are clearly disturbed now, with the exception of Brett, who could well be just at a family barbecue. The Unschool Mark. Jenny manages to free herself from the burning rope and uses a burning branch to ward off Brett. She flees into the woods, and Brett threatens to torch Adam if she doesn't come back. But at this point, Jenny could not give less of a fuck, and she is in the wind, dude. She does not hesitate for a moment as Adam is lit up and begs her for help. But once she realizes she can't help him, she flees. And those screams, dude, they are stomach churning.
Yeah, man. I mean, also, after I just pointed out that Brett hasn't really engaged in the physical crimes much, he goes and dumps a load of gasoline over Adam. But to be fair, we don't see who actually lights him up, and it isn't mentioned in the script either.
Poor Jenny finds herself back at the crossroads she was at earlier. This time she heads in the other direction and finds herself at a classic "You Are Here" public map and notice board alongside a massive wheelie bin. She smashes the glass and steals the map before writing her details in the logbook for anyone who may come after. The kids are closing in though, so Jenny has no choice but to hide in the bin, and it is rank, dude. It's maggots, flies. It looks like it just looks like the thing is literally full of shit. I know what you're saying, Lee. Did someone dump my film analysis in there? Not very kind of you, is it? Brett finds the call for help in the logbook and promptly disposes of it. He ascertains that Jenny now knows the way into town and they'll be able to catch up to her on the path. After they leave, Jenny crawls out of the shit bin and tears off a strip of her dress in order to make a shiv out of the glass shards.
Yeah, that foot is 100% going to get infected now.
Oof, you know it, right? She is spotted by Cooper, though, the baby of the group, whom it seems has finally developed a conscience of sorts. He approaches her from behind, softly beckoning to her, but Jenny is in full feral survival mode now. She whips round and buries the shiv in the boy's neck, her rage turning to regret almost instantly at the 1 hour, 11-minute mark. And she cradles the dying boy in her arms.
Yeah, so this scene plays out a little differently on the page. Check it out.
She smears the mulch into her face, blackening herself. War paint. A black figure brandishing a weapon. A warrior. She catches a figure reflected in the glass shard behind her. Turns. Cooper, a straggler, stumbling out of the woods, right upon her. He looks as surprised as she does. Silence. They lock eyes. Neither knows what to do. The boy raises his mobile phone, hits a key. Jenny shakes her head. She must shut him up, but suffers a moment's hesitation. Somewhere she's a schoolteacher. Cooper. Brett, she's... She strikes, hitting first his defensive hand, then his chest, then his neck. In the neck. It's messy. Arterial. Blood gushes. Cooper gurgles, horribly choking on his blood, sucking for air. Jenny has to cover his mouth, stifle his croupy cries for help, pull him down into the bushes. Fear in his eyes, his life slipping away. The boy writhes, stops, dies in her arms. Jenny looks at the bloodied corpse, a dead child. She is shocked at what she's done. Yeah, so I've got some thoughts on why this was changed, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the subject, Lee.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way it's written on the page pretty much absolves Jenny from any guilt. You know, she literally has no choice. This kid is calling in the cavalry, and she is well within reason to put the little fucker down, I think. On screen, however, it's a much murkier situation. You know, the kid was seemingly trying to help her, and at the least he posed no immediate threat, and this just kind of blurs the lines wonderfully. You know, Jenny reacted instinctually, but she still made a choice to murder that kid, you know, as warranted as it may or may not have been. And it's a great move by Watson here. You know, she could have taken out any other kid and we'd probably have cheered, but because it was the youngest and the most coerced, you know, we're now torn about what we should feel. Also, I put the start of Act 3 here. This is where Jenny's actions seem to first condemn her to a darker fate, I thought.
Yeah, I think the way it's filmed just makes the audience unsure what to feel, you know, in a more kind of satisfying and engaging way. And I think on the page, it kind of undercuts any sympathy we feel for Cooper. But it also reinforces this sort of irredeemable chav stereotype in a way that may have seemed, you know, maybe a little thin, you know?
Yeah, it does kind of almost wander a bit into cliche territory there, doesn't it? You know, and I think I definitely prefer what's on screen.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that happens here is Jenny doesn't really have a choice in this. You know, she
Mm,
reacts. Whereas a
yeah,
little later on, I think she does make a choice, which is sort of interesting. So maybe that has
yeah.
something to do with it as well. Anyway, I totally agree about Act Three starting here, though, dude. I think you're absolutely right. Back on screen, and the gang has found Cooper's body, and Harry is gutted. He blames Brett for this, but their leader is having none of it. He tries to blackmail Harry with Paige's phone footage, but it's not enough. And Harry tries to call someone, and Brett just loses it. I mean, he beats the absolute shit out of the lad, quite possibly killing him at the 1 hour, 15-minute mark and causing a terrified Paige to flee into the dark woods.
Yeah, now interestingly, this whole scene is missing from the script. And, you know, I find that fascinating for a couple of reasons. First, it seems like Brett has fully lost control of the situation now, you know, which offers us and Jenny kind of a sliver of hope that just maybe she's going to get out of this in one piece. And secondly, it's only after possibly beating his friend to death that Brett first seems to experience regret. And don't get me wrong, I don't think for a second he feels bad about his immediate actions. It's more the fear of getting caught, you know, that's hit him. He's bloodied his hands now, you know, there's evidence against him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree, dude. I mean, there's also this sort of a brief moment before the beatdown where Brett is talking down to Harry about his fear of going to prison or pen, sort of penitentiary. And we can gather by what he says here that Brett's dad has almost definitely done some time. And this is yet another negative influence that's been almost glamorized by his son.
Yeah, man, good pickup. It's just a constant cycle here, isn't it?
Mm.
If Brett ever reproduces, it's just going to be more of the same down the road. That kid is going to be fucked up.
So Jenny has reached the fence, but she's in no condition to climb it. She stumbles upon a foxhole and is able to squeeze under it. And man, the soundtrack is really doing a lot of heavy lifting here. It's throwing out some upbeat, struggle is almost over vibes, and we're starting to believe that Jenny might just make it out of this. She stumbles out into the road and is almost struck by a van. The driver, an older teen, picks her up and tries to make sense of her rants. And she tells him about her boyfriend being murdered and her being hunted by a gang. The driver gets worried. He's here to pick up his little brother, Ricky. Yes, that Ricky. And is worried something may have happened to him. He pulls up at the fence and gets out as Ricky and Mark rock up. Jenny wastes no time in jumping into the driver's seat and getting the hell out of Dodge, Lee. She's just about holding it together as she speeds down the dirt road. Suddenly, Paige appears in front of her, frozen like a deer in the headlights. And Jenny hits the gas and absolutely annihilates the chavvy teen, killing her instantly. Jenny drives out of Eden Lake and onto the main road where she makes good progress until another vehicle inadvertently runs her off the road. She seems largely unhurt and stumbles out of the car towards the sound of music and a late night garden party. She screams for help and collapses as the residents run to help her. She wakes up on the sofa with a horde of adults clustered around her, comforting her here. A barking Rottweiler startles her and is herded off into the kitchen where two dog bowls wait, bearing the names Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh shit.
Oh man, we recognize one of the blokes is Brett's dad, and to make matters worse, this is the same bloody house Steve broke into earlier, i.e., Brett's house.
Oh man.
One of the women answers a phone call and quickly becomes hysterical. She's obviously hearing some terrible news. Jenny is getting that sinking feeling and asks to call the police, but Brett's dad slyly refuses. And Jenny is then escorted to the bathroom on the pretense of feeling sick at the 1 hour, 22-minute mark. She locks herself inside, but the shouts and screams from outside are getting louder. She arms herself with a straight razor as one of the women begins screaming. The door is hammered from outside and they demand she opens it. A moment later, it's kicked in. There's Brett like butter wouldn't melt. He's spun some story about Jenny and Steve being sickos, and Brett's dad shuts down any notion of calling the police. It's like looking into a father-son mirror as he bullies his peers into doing what he says. He drags Jenny into the shower along with some of the other men, and the last we hear of her is her awful screams as Brett is sent upstairs to his room with a slap from his dad. And upstairs, he deletes the footage from Paige's phone and tries on Steve's sunglasses in the mirror. And the final shot of the film is him glancing right into the camera.
That final shot, Brett glancing at us. You got any thoughts on it?
I do have thoughts on this, Lee, but I think they're probably better saved for the breakdown. But yeah, what are your initial impressions of this, though?
I don't know, man. I think for me, it's almost like a final fuck you to the audience. Not in a screw you kind of way, but in a final look at this little shit. He's got away with it and he knows it.
Mm.
It's like he's looking at us and saying, "Yeah, what are you gonna do about it?" So come on, man. What did you think of this one?
Okay, well, firstly, I want to say, Lee, I think this film is really, really well made. And like Steve, it's really well executed.
Hmm.
It's great performances throughout, and it's really well directed. Great production design, great sound design. It's a really, really well made film. That said, Lee, I thought it was unrelentingly bleak, depressing as fuck, and actually in places pretty vile. I mean, it's, don't get me wrong, it's extremely effective at building tension, and there's a lot to unpack, which will be fun. But for me, this film was completely unenjoyable, dude. I will never watch this again unless I'm forced to by a coercive alpha podcast co-host.
Not me, mate. Not my podcast.
Again, I mean, I think this is, dude, I think it's a really well made film, and it's effective in terms of what it's trying to achieve kind of thematically and from a viewing experience kind of perspective. But I think this one's going to be interesting to unpack because it really highlights for me kind of why I don't really like horror films, and why I don't really watch them. So a real mixed bag for me, dude. What about you?
I mean, let's be objective here. As you said, this is a great film. Just that slow building dread that eventually escalates into unrelenting raw horror, and it's never glamorized. I mentioned earlier this is such a grounded film, and we linger far more on the repercussions of violence than on the actual deed itself. Not that that makes things any better to watch. During the torture scene, for example, the actual inflicting of wounds is done and dusted quite quickly. It's Steve's bloody face that we linger on, defiant at first, and then at the end, almost kind of broken, But I think a film like this is designed to, as you said, kind of make you feel something, and it definitely does that. It does it very well.
It certainly does that. Yeah, no doubt about it. Okay, then, dude, let's break this baby down. Now, as I'm sure you're all aware, we begin our breakdown with a retrospective look at our reasons for choosing the film.
So, how the film retains audience attention despite its bleakness, and how everyday situations are warped to create terror. So, how does the film keep our attention despite the gruesome and harrowing subject matter? Mainly, I think, through Jenny. I mean, she is painted as such a sweet and endearing soul at the beginning that we are, at first desperate to ensure her survival. And then, as she begins to succumb to the dark side and the kids' atrocities become worse and worse, we want to see if there's going to be repercussions for these actions. As for how Watson uses everyday situations, that's easy. Most of us could probably walk out the door, head to a certain area of town, and encounter a bunch of kids akin to the bunch in the film, but hopefully not quite as deranged. Secluded lake, hiking trail, late night garden party, bunch of kids, a bathroom. None of these things are particularly terrifying or out of the ordinary, but in this film, they become both iconic and terrifying. Okay, so let's have a look at our characters. Are there any introductions that stood out to you as particularly effective or memorable?
Yeah, I didn't find anything that really sort of stood out here, and the intro seemed sort of really quite functional in the script.
Hmm,
But for the sake of this, I mean, I went with Jenny's kind of introductions. I say introductions plural because in the script we actually get two introductions to Jenny. The first is
screenwriting.
from the cutscene we mentioned at the start, which goes like this. Dark woods, thick, tall tree trunks block out the sky. A young woman, Jenny, cradles the bloody, lifeless body of a 12-year-old boy. Her clothes torn, dirty, covered in her blood and his. Her face a patchwork of pain, blood, scratches, sorrow, savagery. In the woods, shouts, torchlights advancing, converging. Jenny can't stay here. She tears off through the woods, running for her life. And then in the script, the very next scene we get is a more kind of, I guess, kind of more traditional intro to Jenny. And that goes like this. Interior, nursery, day. Jenny Hart leads her toddlers through a peekaboo song and gestures. More street chic than Sunday school, she's no doubt a natural, kind, smiley, down at their level, coaxing, delighting in their delight, absolutely in control. The bell rings. The kids sit smiling, obedient, as Jenny teases them, making them wait, smiles, ushering them to their feet like an orchestra conductor. So, what I thought was interesting here is firstly, the obvious contrast in these two introductions. In the first, Jenny is in full survival, mid horror mode. She's bloody and she's dirty and her clothes are torn. In the second, she's working with young kids and it's way more wholesome. But there's some interesting hints at her sort of social status. And I thought this was interesting also because it speaks to what you've indicated was a reason for choosing the script and the film. The first intro on the page and what we actually see in the film, although it's different, gives the audience an active question, I think. And it's a great way to grab the audience's attention. And immediately, this has encouraged the audience to stay the course until that question is answered. How did Jenny get from the school to writhing around in kind of painful terror? So I thought that was really interesting.
Mm.
What about you, dude?
Oh, active questions. That brings back some memories.
Doesn't it?
Um, Nothing really leapt off the page at me, man. But for the sake of picking something, I'm going to say Steve, but then I'm going to follow up. So here's Steve's intro. At the wheel, Steve, like his car, he has a rugged good looks. Feeling the sticky city heat, he yanks off his tie, his mirror shades, blasts his face with the aircon. So there's nothing really outstanding here. It's a perfectly good intro, but Steve kind of acts as our moral compass throughout the film. And I think that is most perfectly summed up in this really brief exchange he has with Jenny before heading into Brett's house for the first time. Jenny, Steve, for God's sake, it's not worth it. Steve, getting out. If everyone said that, where would we be? See, Steve cannot wrap his head around the fact that basic decency and morals do not apply in this place, and it is that lack of comprehension that will ultimately prove to be his undoing.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting, is it? Because you mentioned earlier Steve's morals, and I said I thought there was also, a bit of male pride going
Mm,
on too. I mean, I think this is a really good example of how something is written and how something is performed, and how the sort of difference between the two can emphasize slightly different things. Because I think, Fassbender does play this with a bit of Steve
mm,
feeling like his masculinity is being challenged. Another thing I thought was interesting, which I just thought of, is, talking about Steve's moral compass, is that he's sort of reasonably okay to let the kids kind of get away with bullying young Adam,
yeah.
as long as they don't actually bother them.
Mm.
So it's sort of, his morals are certainly malleable,
Yeah, yeah,
in a
that's a
way,
good
which
point.
is it's just
Yeah,
really
that is a good point.
interesting. Anyway, dude, before we break down the scarology, did you have a scariest moment, Lee?
Man, I think what unnerves me the most about this film is it's just the rawness of it. I've been in situations like this with the Beach House. Thankfully, never to this extent, but it's something that is all too familiar, and that familiarity makes the situations a lot more horrifying. If horror is believable, that it could happen to you, and that mindset means that films like this will stick in your mind, I think, for a very long time. It's that whole mob escalation kind of thing that this film realizes so well. The egging on, the encouragement, the peer pressure, the language, and that fucking denial mentality. Nah, not me, mate, not my kids. It's infuriating because it's so real, it's so grounded.
Yeah.
Um, if I had to choose a particular scene, it's going to be where all the kids take turns to torture Steve, and poor Jenny has to watch from the trees. It's just awful. But I would also say that ending, that last scene in the bathroom, when you realize that she's not going to get away, and I think that also is pretty damn horrific. How about you, man?
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree, dude. For me, it was the sort of the torture scene all day long. It's
Mm,
absolutely horrendous. I think, like, I mean, the thing is, it's how it's played, right? It's just played so naturalistically, and Fassbender does such a kind of great job in this scene. I just think it's truly a horrific kind of scene, disturbing. Alrighty then, let's talk about the scarology. So first of all, does the film more or less conform to the 10-minute rule?
yes, in fact, it's pretty much bang on the money.
Oh, sweet, dude. Okay, so break it down for us, Lee.
Okay, well, our first real jump scare hits at 12 minutes, and it's a mild one, to be fair. The barking dog, which startles Jenny. Then it's a fake out jump scare with Steve pranking Jenny in the tent at the 20-minute point. But then the tension starts to build as Steve breaks into Brett's house at 25 minutes, and then everything goes to shit when the dog is accidentally killed at 30 minutes. And from there, things escalate big time as the gang takes turns torturing Steve in, as we said, a truly gut-wrenching scene at 39 minutes. And then the gang chase Jenny to the porta cabin at 46 minutes. Next up is the bird hide at 52 minutes, and then Jenny putting that fucking spike through her foot at 57 minutes.
Oof.
And we then roll on to the Steve and Adam cookout at 1 hour and 2 minutes, followed shortly after at 1 hour and 11 with Jenny killing little Cooper. And then Brett finally loses his cool, beats the crap out of Harry at 1 hour and 15 minutes, and the rug is firmly pulled out from under us at 1 hour and 22 as Jenny realizes that she has literally just walked into the lion's den.
Okay, well, let's break down those acts for you. So, our first act is a bit of a slow burn consisting of three fairly evenly placed mild scares before Act Two throws everything into high gear with seven scares hitting at far shorter intervals before Act Three slows things back down with two more drawn out scares. So, what does that give us? It's a slow burn starter, which then kicks into high gear for a breathless midpoint before slowing the pace down again with a bleak, impactful ending.
Fantastic. And did you have any thoughts on the themes at work here?
Yeah, man. So, I mean, thematically, I think this film works really, really well. If we're referencing our Parker themes, I think this film is really kind of morality of individuals. Are you a bystander when terrible things are being done? Are you prepared to kind of speak out and take action to stop it, even under the threat of pain or ostracization? Are you going to be sort of willfully ignorant and dissolve yourself of responsibility? Or worst case, allow yourself to become a participant? And I think this plays out most clearly with Brett and the group of kids and also the parents, but also I think with Steve and Jenny. As you've mentioned, Steve is unwilling to let wrong things go and confronts it kind of head on. She's clearly has a moral center, but either because she feels powerless or it's not kind of worth it, seems more of the opinion that they should, let this go and leave. And I think this is a tale as kind of as old as time and is something that we see across human cultures. It's interesting as well because, as I mentioned earlier, sort of Jenny does she kind of chooses to run Paige down.
Mm.
Whereas, as I say, the act with with Cooper was a little bit more sort of instinctive and maybe accidental. So even Jenny, is kind of making choices and she's killed someone in the end, in sort of, I mean, difficult situation, but kind of cold blood. And as I mentioned, like Steve is, he's happy to he's not happy, but he'll let the kid be bullied as long as he's not bothered. So I think everyone is making kind of moral choices
Mm.
based on what's going on in the situation and the context, that those decisions are being made. So I think it's really interesting in terms of
Yeah.
morality of individuals. I think in a wider context, we have certainly ideas of class kind of coming through pretty strongly. You have the kind of middle class out of towners judging the working class locals, certainly with Jenny and Steve in the pub, the locals feeling aggrieved by the development of the lakes. And, we see this with the graffiti on the sign. And certainly making a sort of note of the Ray-Ban glasses, that sort of thing. These are the sort of the trappings of that socioeconomic kind of group. We also have this idea of communities kind of facing generational problems. And maybe the best way of saying this is kind of who pays for the sins of the parents. This idea that parents being irresponsible and not teaching their kids how to behave or setting bad examples is a problem which spans generations, and trauma is kind of passed down through generations. And we see this very clearly in Brett's relationship with his father. But I do want to linger a little on that last shot of the film. We spoke about it a little bit earlier, but that moment that kind of Brett looks into the camera and looks at us, the audience. So I think it's really interesting. I want to sort of say, just read out how it appears in the script. So this is from the script. Brett withdraws to his bedroom. The horrible screams of grief and pain continue below. He pulls out Steve's mirror shades, poses in front of the mirror. Jenny, off screen, in brackets muffled. No, no, please. His death stare, mirror shades on, off. Jenny screams. The boy turns to look at us. Black screen. So I think in a film like this, this is kind of a real statement. You only really break the fourth wall like that if you want the audience to reflect on themselves or reflect on how they interact with the themes of the film, I think. Obviously, you get kind of fourth wall breaking a reasonable amount in films. We've seen just to name a few. I mean, you've got obviously Deadpool and Annie Hall, obviously, Ferris Bueller. Cuffs. Did you ever watch Cuffs?
I was just thinking, I can't believe someone else has actually seen Cuffs.
Goddamn classic.
I thought I'd imagined that film for a long time.
When is Cuffs going to come up on script to screen? Well, it's done. Yeah, but all those films, I mean, they use it as kind of a stylistic choice, right? It's kind of a feature. Here we have a film which is kind of treating everything in a very, very naturalistic way. And, the filmmakers are really sort of striving for this sense of visceral reality. This is real, right? This could happen and this is happening. So that look at the end, deliberately addressing the audience in this way, is a real choice. And I think the question we need to ask ourselves is, what is Watson trying to say with this? And obviously, I mean, it could be multiple things. It's open to interpretation. But I picked out sort of three which really kind of occurred to me when I was reflecting on the film. And I think the first is, it's kind of asking, what would you do? What would you stand up or would you join in? Do you have the courage to stand up for what is right? Or do you take the easier path where there's less risk, but bit by bit, you may be forced down a road where, before you know what you're doing, you're committing kind of horrendous acts. And that I think is kind of an interesting interpretation in terms of asking the audiences that question. The second kind of interpretation I came up with was it's asking the audience kind of, are you a part of the problem here? Are you kind of classist in any way? Are you stereotyping people? Are you parenting properly? Are you passing your own trauma onto your kids? Are you getting drunk, partying all night and smacking the shit out of your kids when they step out of line, but never really teaching them, and teaching them primarily, I guess, that violence doesn't solve a lot of problems. It generally just creates more problems. And the third idea I came up with, and this is what I thought actually initially when I saw the ending, and you can tell this is coming from me, Lee, but so when I saw the ending, it's kind of similar, but it's, I guess, just like a little more meta. And that is this idea of kind of violence begetting violence. We've watched a film that is incredibly kind of violent, and we've watched it for entertainment, right? So look, violent films, violent games, social media reels of people being knocked out or street fights, and all these things lead to a sort of, I think, a coarsening of our culture and an erosion of our empathy towards our fellow man, and a reflexive distrust of those around us, and jumping to violence as a means of problem solving, sort of way quicker than we probably should. And are we, by watching this film for entertainment, a film which depicts horrendous kind of acts of violence, are we the problem? Is that leading to a culture where violence has once again become sort of entertainment, essentially? And I think, children kind of see that and are exposed to it more and more, and think less about, I don't know, like torturing animals or carrying knives or terrorizing people who are different, or coercing and bullying people to get what they want. So, I'm not sure which one it is precisely, and it's obviously subjective, but I think like the message is generally quite clear here. It's we, the audience, are kind of participants in this. And I think it asks kind of, what would you do? And some of this is here now. And what are you doing?
Hmm.
Enjoying the entertainment. So yeah, I mean, I think that's what I think, dude. I thought it was
Yeah.
really interesting kind of last shot, and kind of worth reflecting on and thinking about. Yeah, what do you think, dude?
Well, there's obviously something of a social commentary on modern youth hoodie culture at work here, but I had something of an interesting revelation when I was looking at applying our classic Parker themes to this film. This is
Ah,
kind of a thought experiment, and that is that you can literally apply every Parker theme to this movie.
oh, really?
Yeah, okay. So bear with me while I break this down. I'd love to hear your thoughts when I'm done. So first up, our list for Parker themes is the desire for justice. This one is pretty straightforward. Steve and Jenny are wronged by the teens, and rather than let it go, Steve believes that justice should rightfully prevail, and it's this that leads him into Brett's house and that ultimately sets things on the downward spiral. The next one is Pursuit of Love. And this is the whole reason Steve and Jenny are at the lake in the first place. Steve has brought her there to propose and begin their new life together. Then there's the morality of individuals, and this is a big one, and arguably, probably the main drive of the film. Steve's moral compass compared to those of the teens and their families, and the resulting clash that occurs because of it. And then you've got desire for order. This one is really closely mapped with desire for justice. Steve comes from a background of order and decency, and like Jenny, believes that is how the world works. And then you've got pursuit of pleasure, and this one is all on Brett. He's fucking loving like nearly every moment of this. He takes sadistic joy in manipulating and torturing those around him and watching the repercussions of his actions. Again, we're all about the ramifications here. Then the next theme is fear of death. And this one's obvious. The danger of death hangs over Steve and Jenny for the majority of the film. And then fear of the unknown runs on a similar path. This is largely a strange location for Steve and Jenny. They're out of their element. The people, the culture is almost alien to them at times, and they cannot predict how these people are going to react. Desire for validation is the last one. And this is summed up nicely in the amount of peer pressure on display from Cooper and Harry to poor Adam, who is desperate to be a part of the gang rather than the focus of its hostility. So there you go, man. An interesting little thought experiment, if nothing else.
Yeah, man. I think that's really cool, dude. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think you can definitely make a case that all of the Parker themes. It's great that you just sort of gave us a list of all the Parker themes, by the way, because I'm not sure we've actually mentioned all of
You
them in a
probably haven't,
podcast
yeah.
before. Yeah, it's usually
People have been
just
like,
a
"What the
few.
fuck have you been rabbiting on about these past years?"
I know. But yeah, I mean, to a greater or lesser degree, I think depending on the character or the scene, you can apply pretty much all of these. So I think that's a really cool kind of breakdown. I mean, just from a learning perspective, Lee, if you asked me like, what's your film about? And I listed like all of the Parker themes, what would you say to that?
I'd, I'd probably say you were a bit of a pretentious wanker, to be honest. But
Well, that's
I mean,
probably
but in all,
true, Lee. I mean, a fair
nah.
critique, I would say.
But in all seriousness, that was just a fun little experiment. I mean, as you alluded to earlier, I think morality of individuals is definitely the driving force here. But it does also go to show in kind of roundabout ways that, themes can often be quite subjective.
Definitely.
An example being the different viewpoints, we have on Steve actions. Is it morals that drive him to confront the gang or his masculinity? The answer will vary by the viewer. But really, unless the director like outright states it, there's no real correct answer.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, and it's it's so subjective, isn't it? I think
Mm.
in general terms, you want to sort of try and focus yourself on a sort of singular theme as much as you can,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I've made the mistake of trying to jam too much into a project, and it does become
Yeah.
a bit sort of muddied. But yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's all subjective, right? You can sort of pick
Mm.
out so much from these films, and especially a film like this. I think you can really kind of pick a lot of things out of it. So, what, if anything, do you think you've learned from the script here, Lee?
Okay, I think this may well be the most grounded film that we've covered yet. No, it is. It is the most grounded film we've covered yet. It's so entirely naturalistic, and that's a massive part of what makes it so horrifying. This is a situation that pretty much any of us could, to some extent, step into at almost any moment in our lives, and I think that innate realness is something I'd love to play with in a future project. And another thing that Watson does very, very well is his use of mise-en-scene in the script. Be it discarded bottles or mutilated animals. Even when Brett and his gang aren't on screen, we can still feel their presence through the remnants of their passing. He uses every bit of visual real estate. And as a result of this, his action lines can be a little on the bulkier side, often weighing in at 4 lines. But despite this, the script it never feels blocky or overwritten. There's always plenty of white space on the page, and the script is never a chore to read. In fact, and this is always a sign of a great script, I often found myself just devouring pages at a time when I only intended to refresh myself on 1 or 2 scenes at best.
Yeah, man, that's cool. I mean, I totally agree. I think, the use of mise-en-scene is as either kind of exposition delivery or character development or tension building sort of devices or to advance the plot. It's really, really strong, and it is in the script. It's not just
Mm,
sort of seen on the film, and I think that's a really, really good tip. We see this in the sort of porter cabin scene where Jenny is reaching for the walkie-talkie. We see it on the sign, as we mentioned. We see it with the map, and of course with the smashed kind of bird eggs and detritus left by the kids. It's really great use of mise-en-scene as kind of metaphor in some
mm,
situations, but also, as I say, to move things along. It's fantastic stuff. Um, I think for me, what I probably will take from this more than anything is the intelligent kind of use of mise-en-scene as a storytelling device rather than sort of something we just see in the background.
yeah.
So I think that's really, really what I will sort of take forward, I think. Yeah, one thing I thought when you were just sort of talking as well is, the fact that this is kind of so naturalistic, in a lot of
Mm,
horror films, you kind of get to a point where you sort of ask yourself, would I do that? Or the protagonist maybe, or someone makes a choice where it's
yeah.
like the classic walking down the dark corridor, right? Would you do that? Or it's sort of
Yeah.
sometimes it kind of can pull me out of a film where you're like,
Mm,
I'd never do that, dude. Whereas I
yeah.
think in this film, like the choices being made because of the tone of the film and the way that it's sort of shot, I guess, and written, obviously, you can believe each of the decisions being made along the way.
Yeah.
And in a sense, that just gives the film more power. It sort
Yeah.
of it gives the audience more of an anchor, and you can really see yourself in that position. And I
Yeah.
think it makes the film all the more horrific because of it, right?
Absolutely, man. I mean, something that just popped in my head when you said about it is like, there's no kind of classic, apart from maybe the tent scene where we get that kind of fake out jump scare. There's
Mm,
no kind of classic horror shots. There's no kind of walking, somewhere dark, waiting for someone to jump out on you. There's no
yeah.
kind of like well framed use of negative space, nothing like that. It's all literally like you're stood there watching things happen just there in the shot almost.
Yeah, and it's kind of this idea of incremental kind of
Mm,
your sort of things are getting out of control, very sort of with small steps, and I think that's kind of it's almost a metaphor for what's happening with the group of kids, right?
yeah,
You've got Brett sort of coercing these kids into sort of taking small steps that are leading to sort of great, harms. So that's really interesting, isn't it? Just to sort of
mm.
think about those things and unpack. Okay, man. Well, I think we're almost done here. So before we wrap up and talk about our next episode, what would you rate the script and the film as here?
I'm going to drop a solid 8 out of 10 for the film, and I'm going to do the same for the script. I think they are both tight as hell, really well done, proper exemplifiers of the craft in both aspects.
Nice, dude. I str I struggled with this a little bit, Lee, because I didn't know quite whether I'm going to give the script an 8, despite sort of not enjoying the film in the least, and
Mhm.
never wanting to watch it again. I ended up giving the film an 8 as well because I can see how well it's made, right? I can see that it achieves what I presume it set out to achieve with great success. And I sort of based my score on that rather than my enjoyment levels. If
Yeah, that's
if I
cool.
did it on enjoyment levels, it will probably be like a 2. So I'm sort of rising above and being more mature, really, I
Good man.
think.
Brilliant. So what does that give us? That gives us a highly respectable 16 out of 20 for both the film and the script. And once again, we are pretty much on the same page with this one.
Yeah, nice, man. Okay, well, all that said, I did want to have a little chat about something, Lee, that kind of circles back to the very first introductory episode we recorded. I mean, it is true that, you love horror, right? And I
Mhm.
really don't. And that's not sort of made up for the podcast. I mean, that is a real life thing. And that said, for the life of me, I don't understand why anyone would want to watch this film. I mean, this is kind of how I felt about The Descent too, and we touched on that we touched on this in that episode. I think the difference here is we don't have the kind of goofy cave monsters for entertainment, right? But this one is
Yeah.
played totally for realsies, and we have animal torture and human torture, and Steve's being stabbed in the kidneys, and he's being stabbed in the face, for fuck's sake. Like, it is so bleak and depressing, like that ending. I just don't understand, like, genuinely, dude. Like, I don't understand what people are engaging with here. Like, why watch this, and what pleasure are people sort of deriving from it? Because dude, I'm pretty sure people, in on the whole, like, don't go to horror films so they can unpack the themes. uh yeah, it just boggles my mind, Lee. Like, I know it's subjective, right?
Yeah.
But what are people, why would you watch this movie?
I just enjoy watching people being tortured, dude. I mean, no,
I
I'm
knew
kidding.
it.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding mostly. I don't know, man. I mean, I've asked myself this question a lot, and for me, I think it just boils down back down to that kind of introductory episode again. I kind of get a kick out of the fear, Maybe
Mm.
it's like a residual from our caveman days, a nice adrenaline spike every now and again. Maybe I'm just so desensitized to regular shit now that this is the only way I can kind of spike my pulse. I don't know, and it's definitely I mean, it's definitely an acquired thing. I mean, another thing is I love seeing the response of people I'm watching the film with.
Right.
That's another big thing for me. From watching a horror film I've seen before, I usually spend more time watching the people I'm watching it with because I love to see their reaction. I love to think like, oh man, you're gonna crap yourself in a minute.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe it's something to do with that as well. I don't know. I can't say for sure. I think it's just like you say, it's subjective, different strokes for different folks. But I will, however, adhere to the old adage that people that enjoy, and especially those that create horror, do tend to be the sweetest, most down-to-earth folks on the planet. Not me, obviously, but the majority of the rest of them, they're just like top people. I think maybe because all their demons are just on the page or on the screen. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
cathartic in a way.
Yeah. That's true, isn't it? I mean, pretty much to the letter. Like, that's, for the most part, I mean, that's kind of true. The people that create sort of horror, like the genre, tend to be really lovely people.
Yeah.
I know you sort of said, I was thinking, you mentioned, a little while back, I'm not sure what episode, but you said a film like Martyrs is something that you'd never want to watch again, like, or
Yes.
engage with again. And, it's just sort of, I don't know, dude. I think it is ultimately, it just comes down to sensibility, right? It's just,
Hmm.
I watch a film like this and I'm like, oh, that was fucking horrible. Like, why would I want to watch? Why am I watching this? Like, I'm not, there's no enjoyment there. I mean, I
Yeah.
like the analysis, and that's kind of, I'm obviously here to learn about horror and how horror is crafted and that sort of thing. And I can switch my sort of film analysis head on, being like a cine nerd, and just enjoy it for that. But yeah, dude. I mean, this one was rough. I'm not
Hmm.
gonna lie, Lee. This was pretty bleak, man. We need to get back to those comedy horrors at some point soon, brother, because this is so depressing.
Well, we had to go down the dark road a little bit
We
for you.
do every now and
But,
again. Yeah, well, I need to be desensitized, so
that's true. We'll get Martyrs next week.
Oh God. Okay. Well, that's a wrap for season 3 of the Script to Screen podcast. I can't believe we're there, Lee. Season 3, we're all wrapped up. We will be back before you know it, though, with more of what you love. In the meantime, we'll also have in-depth blogs covering horror screenwriting going up on our website, and also our 30-second film reviews. They're all on the website now. That's www.scripttoscreenpodcast.com. So if you're ever in a pickle about what to watch. A quick scan of that will help you find your next scary, or in my case, maybe highbrow viewing spectacle.
If you've got any ideas or suggestions for season 4, you can reach us via the website or at script2screenpodcast@gmail.com. And we would genuinely love to hear from you. So please don't be shy. Drop us a line with any thoughts you might have.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please do leave a review or rate the podcast on your podcatcher of choice, because it really does help us reach new people. And we've had a couple of reviews, haven't we, Lee?
We have, yeah. So a special thanks out to the real Mr. 305 and Film Nerd 007 for leaving us some great reviews. It's really helpful. We love you guys. And if you want to shout out, leave us a review, and we'll throw your name out there. Thanks ever so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A little name checking. Why the hell not? Okay, so do check out our socials. We're on Facebook and Blue Sky and can obviously be reached there. We also publish to YouTube, so you can listen to us there. No visuals, but plenty of audio goodness. Feel free to drop us a line with any thoughts on our website. That's www.script2screenpodcast.com. We always love hearing from you guys, and we have much more content there. Script samples, the scarology graphs, all sorts of stuff going on. And of course, we are now offering script reading services. This is new for us. We will analyze your script and give you tailored feedback on your work. We're actually both quite experienced at doing this. We also are creating pitch decks for projects. We'll collaborate with you to create a stunning pitch deck for your project, which you can take out into the world and get pitching. So if that's of interest, go to our website, navigate to the script reading page, and you can get all of the info there. But until next time, do take care.
Suffer the children and keep writing those scares, folks.